Alright, we are recording, and as I kind of figured would end up happening, I'm having to split actually the first chapter. It's yeah, a bit too long, and it's just getting a bit too late. So, yeah, gonna start running through this, and, it's interesting. Let's just go with that for the time being. Because, I think the simplest way to put it... Okay, so let me back up, go to the beginning. Yeah, so it starts with setting up where Moore is, which some of this we got in the introduction, that he had been assigned by the king to go do this. Eventually ended up in Antwerp. There he met Robert? Let's go with Robert. I might be getting the first name wrong, but last name was Giles, so Giles. Giles. And they became friends very quickly, and basically described that there was no better friend than this man. And at one point, he's coming out of church and just sees, there he is over there, cool, and he's talking to this man who's described as beyond, past the flower, the bloom of his age. So basically, he'd be like middle-aged, be a little bit older. Long beard, suntanned skin, and also the cloak he wears is just on him carelessly. So and he walks up, Giles introduces him, but it is I could tell he was a sailor. And this is a man who said that he journeyed with... Let's see if I can actually find it here. Okay. Traveled with Americus Vespucius. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Who is the Italian explorer who North and South America are actually named for. Yeah. And that he journeyed with him for technically 4 of the journeys that Americus took, but on the last one, he chose to stay behind, along with 23 others. And this was he wanted to go exploring, because that's his thing. It's a little confusing, though some of it just... He did exploring, met various nations, but then, founded... I'm not sure if it's trying to suggest, there was some way to get from... This actually would have been in South America, because it mentioned New Castile, and was clearly, this... He got there by ship. New Castile in Spain is, landlocked, so, it had to... I had to look up New Castile, America, and say, okay, South America, got it. It just seemed odd, because then it was like, he managed to find a Portuguese ship that took him back to the old world. And that he eventually made his way to Antwerp, meeting Giles. But, described that he also is Portuguese by birth, speaks Latin and Greek, but more so with Greek, because he loves philosophy, and... It even says in there that, all the Romans really gave us for that is Seneca and Cicero. I'm pretty sure I know Cicero's one. I think Seneca was the other. And it's like, okay. I mean, I actually have a book over there on Stoics that's, crap. I'm blanking on his name, but he wrote Meditations. The, one Roman emperor, it's gone. Whatever. He wrote Meditations. That's what it starts with. But then we also get some of Seneca's letters, and it's like, I actually like Seneca's writing a lot better, and his approach to it better than Meditations. So, okay, cool. Moving on. So it's basically, this is a well-traveled and very intelligent man. And now he's been introduced to Moore, and Giles was even like, this dude's really cool, so, we should see if we can arrange for you to, meet and talk more formally than just, out on the street. So they do that. And what I'm still in the middle of here, with this, Discourse of Raphael of the Best State of a Commonwealth, he is sharing his opinion on, because he's traveled everywhere, including to England, and he's sharing his opinion on certain practices there. Wait. I should first explain this, because this is also... sorry, I did skip some stuff here, because I'm just going by memory. The bulk of it is... his commentary that has multiple flaws to it, by the way, which is, I kind of want to say this earlier, I'll just say it now. Reading through this, I do not like this man. I really don't, because I recognize so many faults in his logic, in his argument, and even in some of his claims. There's one thing that it's actually last highlight before I checked. Okay, yeah, I'm like halfway through this chapter. That he claims as though he suggested something that everyone around, like he suggested something in the past to a group of men, and that none of them liked it when he suggested, but now once this other dude suggested that, oh, now they all liked it. It's like, that's not what happened. It's like, I just read it. What you're even conveying now to Giles, to Moore and Giles, does show that is not what happened here. You described this other system. What the other person then did is say, okay, how we can implement it here in England. That was novel. You just saying this is the system, and everyone being like, yeah, we can't possibly do that here. That makes no sense. You weren't offering a solution to that. You were just saying, hey, this is how other people do it. This is the guy who was then like, well, since we're dealing with crime and punishment kind of stuff, maybe we can talk to somebody about, hey, give a reprieve to that dude who you'd otherwise execute, and let's try this. That's an actual solution. Okay? You just saying, oh yeah, other people tried this. What are you expecting them to do? It's like, oh, sign us up. We'll just completely change the law and go to that. It's like, what? No, the guy is actually talking about how we can see if this works here or not. That's actually helpful. And you're like, oh, well, once he suggested, like, he's suggesting something different. What he said is something completely different. I cannot say I'm not guilty of doing that stuff myself, but it still is I recognize that that's a fault, and this dude is he's retelling the story, and even in that doesn't realize he's being an idiot. I'm actually gonna close this for now. Well, I shouldn't. Let me go back through this stuff. Okay. While he was still traveling in the New World, and let me check something. It looks like I might be. Okay, no, I shouldn't be peeking too much. Anyway, when he was traveling, he did encounter various interesting people, let's say. There. Seen past the flower of his age, by the way, that was the term. When he was traveling, one thing he encountered ships of various designs, and it's kind of funny how he mentions how he had encountered some vessels that were flat bottom and the sails were made of reeds and wicker, woven close together. Only some were of leather, but afterwards they found ships made with round keels and canvas sails, and all specs like our ships, and the seamen understood both astronomy and navigation. He got wonderfully into their favor by showing them the use of the needle, of which till then they were utterly ignorant. I'm assuming when he says use of the needle, sewing. They have canvas sails, but haven't figured out how to stitch things together. You can make needles out of bone. Like, we're talking Stone Age. Needles are like a Stone Age technology. Round keels and canvas sails, but doesn't have that Stone Age. It's just, I see that and it's like that doesn't follow. That does not follow to me. And also, I don't necessarily see the issue with a flat bottom boat. I mean, that's essentially a barge, which flat bottom. Well, a flat bottom would very effectively increase the buoyancy. Well, it would be the most efficient way to increase the buoyancy of any craft. However, because of it being flat, I can see that being less for speed, less efficient for speed, but also it might be less stable in certain circumstances. Like if for on a river, a flat bottom is probably fine if you can assume that the river is relatively stable, relatively calm. When it's something not calm, I can see a rounded keel being better, because that's going to, the center of gravity is going to be down such that it will correct. Whereas flat bottom, the center of gravity would be up higher, most likely, or at least where it is. I can see that being a problem. So rounded keel is better in some circumstances, not all. It just seems odd how it's being described here. But to be fair, I might be more knowledgeable of certain things, or at least better at guessing certain things than Moore is with some of this. There's certainly going to be stuff he'd be better than me at. Doesn't mention that while he's talking about some of this, this would be Giles and Moore. We made no inquiries after monsters, the face creatures he had encountered, than which nothing is more common. For everywhere one may hear of ravenous dogs and wolves and cruel man-eaters, but it's not so easy to find states that are well and wisely governed. Which, I like this. I really do like this, because this makes sense. You have this wonderful resource for, yes, some very extraordinary knowledge, such as the monsters, but are the monsters here? I'm saying that's campfire story kind of stuff. Like, that's great to tell kids, but they are men. They have other concerns. How do other people solve those concerns? I mean, if they say, hey, we got wolves here, how do they deal with wolves there? That's fine. But just we have our government here. How do they govern? That may seem like a more common kind of thing, a more boring kind of thing, but it can still be a very informative thing. So it's like, I appreciate that. That makes sense. And it kind of reminds me of something, it's not really the same, and not all the same, but it still made me think of it. Knew somebody who once had the opportunity to speak with experts in the field, let's say, and one thing this was it was a formal setup, but like informal kind of meeting, like you'd be sitting down having meals with them kind of stuff. I suggested ask them for recipes, which sounds really stupid, I know, because like you can ask one of the experts in the field, and you're saying ask them for recipes. It's like, yes, because everybody has a favorite cookie, okay? Everybody has a favorite meal. They have that recipe. Talk to them like that, because you're talking to them as a person. Like, it's person to person. It's not student to teacher, but person to person. And the way that may impact your the relationship you have there could be very positive, because it is your people now, as opposed to student and teacher, where that can get really boring. Whereas plus it can also be it's like, yeah, I spent time with whoa, hey, I remember that person. They asked me what my favorite cookie was. It's like, are they any good? Yeah, they're great. No, because it also sticks in your mind, kind of thing. So it's, anyway, not quite the same, but it still made me think of it. They then asked him, why is it that you aren't in any king's service? And he basically says that when I was young, I basically gave away things to my friends that normally you would only see somebody doing that when they're old and no longer have use for it. How can I possibly be in service to a king when that would be like an insult to my friends? Where it's like, I can't be of greater service to this random king than to my friends. Kind of fair, but it's also silly, because but you're assuming that was the greatest service you could provide, and also that once provided, you need never attempt to provide more service. Yeah. Oh yeah, he also has some criticism in general for hang on. Okay. Concerning why he wouldn't want to be a counsel to kings and princes and such, because as if it were a great misfortune that any should be found wiser than his ancestors, but though they willingly let go all the good things that were among those of former ages, yet if better things were proposed, they cover themselves absently with this excuse of reverence to past times. So he's basically saying that to him, this Raphael character, they have no interest in learning new ideas. They're only interested in maintaining what has worked before. And it's like, what's your point? I mean, he's taking it to a hyperbolic level, which, to be fair, Raphael would. He finds these people frustrating. But it still is it's like, I'm not getting into the specifics yet, but the punishment, the crime and punishment stuff I was alluding to before, you can't just adopt somebody else's and expect that to work, because it's part of their culture, it's part of their government. You have a different government, you have a different culture, so not everything is going to translate the same. You do need to consider it carefully. And it's also, it's like, well, why don't you want to try something new? Didn't you get this from somewhere else? Yeah, so it's an old idea that's not what I mean. Yes, it's just, Raphael has many intellectual faults, and it really is annoying me, and it's kind of interesting. I don't know if I would have noticed this when I read it before. So yeah, then they start talking about, this is where the crime and punishments comes up, is he had observed in England. Okay. The other stuff, he was talking to Giles, Giles and more directly. He then changes to, yes, I've been in England before, and when I was there, I met with Cardinal Morton, who, the patron for More, we've had that in the introduction. So this would be a way for More to share some of the arguments and ideas that he had witnessed Morton at least hearing, if not sharing, when he lived with him. So that's potentially what's going on here. But it is this Raphael, when in England, had noticed that they were hanging a large number of thieves, which he has a significant issue with this. And some of the stuff, I understand what he's saying, but there's also what he's saying I either know is false or demonstrates a very shallow understanding. That's not to say his larger points are false, but the ground he's standing on is very poor. So, because yeah, they are executing thieves. That's what it is that's what the punishment is under the law at the time. And that it's getting so bad that they'll have 21 thieves on the same gibbet, so same beam that they're hanging from, which is quite a lot. And he goes on about this stuff and how some of it is, fortunately later there is something that calls out, because I haven't put in my notes how silly it is, because he's basically defending that, oh yeah, the thieves that they're being forced into this, essentially, to use modern language, they're victims, so we need to excuse this. It's like, that's not how that actually works. Still choosing to be thieves, but he also tries to say that thieves and soldiers are basically the same people. That's what he's trying to claim here, because when a nation is at war, these people would be soldiers. And so once they're then at peace, the soldiers will turn to being thieves. It's like, no. He also, I'm trying to remember if it was before this. Yeah, so there's a lot of points being shared that are all just assume they mesh together. Which it's funny, because this isn't necessarily the best way to put it, but a way I feel like putting it is, he's making emotional arguments, and he very much meanders from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, as though this all just works together very neatly. So I'm not sure if it's in this, where I am right here, or if it was a little before, a little after, where he mentions that some of these people that are thieves, they have to be thieves because they can't be craftsmen because they were injured. So it's like, they lost an arm or a hand, something like that. So they can't do their craft anymore. And they're too old to learn anything new. So they have to be thieves. It's like, oh, okay. How many of them, how many people are that? It's like, there's no question about that. It's like, oh, okay. So there's a class of of thieves that they can't do honest work, supposedly. You're giving them this excuse. That's not necessarily true, but let's just say that group exists. What about the rest of the population of thieves? What about them? What about those who can work? I'm not saying in defense of they should be executed. I'm not arguing that, but it still is okay, you're talking about this group of thieves over here that, oh, well, what do we do with it? But what about this group? Okay, I mean, is the solution for this group the same as this group? No, that would be foolish. He also tries saying that some of them are, the reason why they're thieves is because basically they had worked for one lord for a while, because it was a feudal system that he's describing. But then when that lord died and went to their son, or whoever the next lord is, I guess it, in theory, could also be a son-in-law, but in any case, goes to them, they don't know how to manage it, and so things just fall apart, or they lose control of the land, and so now the people that had been working the land, the tenants there, they're just unemployed now and cast out, so now they have to become thieves. It's like, okay, why are they unable to work somewhere else, like become a tenant to somewhere else? That land still exists. Where did it go? Like, if somebody else bought it, why couldn't they just go and be like, hey, I've been living here for years, been working the land, can I stay and just work for you? I mean, it's like, oh, well, there's these hard luck stories can happen, therefore these things are excuses. It's like, are you an idiot? It's like, okay, find me these people that you're just declaring are victims, and therefore that's why they do the crime. That's why they commit the crime of theft, and that means that, well, then we shouldn't treat that. Then we shouldn't punish them. That it's excusable. It's like, no, I mean, I can understand why someone would do something. They still did the thing, though. They're still wrong. They're still a criminal. Can we acknowledge that? And it's like, Raphael seems incapable of that kind of thinking. Yeah, and then this is about the whole thieves and soldiers being the same. And also, he does mention that when, like, a lord loses something because they are just idle, I can believe some lords would have been, but not necessarily all. And also that lords still had some responsibility, which is also kind of mentioned here, that they were raised to be honorable in the way a soldier must be honorable, so that these idle lords would actually serve as good soldiers. But now they're being forced to be thieves because they don't know any craft. Where we get this, you may as well say, replied I, meaning more, sorry, not more, Raphael, that you must cherish thieves on the account of wars, for you will never want the one as long as you have the other. And as robbers prove sometimes gallant soldiers, so soldiers often prove brave robbers, so near alliance there is between these two sorts of life. And it's like, dude, that's just insulting. What is... Now, we do also get something that I'm curious about if this is historically accurate. I mean, you'd think it would be, but it can also be Raphael was kind of an idiot, so he might not have this correct. In France, there was yet a more pestiferous sort of people, for the whole country is full of soldiers still kept up in time of peace, if such a state of nation can be called a peace. It's like, so they're maintaining a standing army. Actually, yeah, you can absolutely still consider that a peace. I don't know why you wouldn't. It's also worth noting that the idea of a standing army, I'm not sure when that was, but it was something that I think it was an English king. When he did that, it changed warfare forever. Because it had been that, like, the lords, legitimately, you would call them during certain times of the year and go to war. So there was a time of year where it's like, yeah, you're going to go to war, but the rest of the year you don't, because they need to go back and do work. And that this was a requirement for them to basically be lords, to have that land. So what ended up happening was the king was like, hey, you know what? Instead of doing that, you can just pay me. Sure, if we don't need to go to war, we'll just pay. So they started paying him, and then he just hired an army. So maintained a standing army, even during peace. But that also meant people he was hiring, that was their jobs. So he could go to war at any time of the year. And he did. And it was very successful because the people he was going to war with, he was going to war with them at a time they didn't have soldiers. So a standing army, yeah, it actually, yes, it allowed him to go to war, but it also would deter anyone from going to war with him. Because it's like, we don't, like, only half the year do we have people to go to war with him. But yeah, still kept up in time and peace. And these are kept in pay upon the same account that you plead for those idle retainers about noblemen. So it sounds like they are getting paid by the... Well, that's also true. They'd be paid by the state in much the same way that nobles are getting paid by their tenants. Which I know that is kind of... Because I'm pretty sure it would be by the tenants. It's not the state also paying them. It's like, okay, but that's still, like, it's a different function here. What are you talking about? What are you going on about? Let's just realize the test system did something it didn't want to do, it looks like. Anyway. Hang on. Those idle retainers about noblemen. This being a maxima of those pretended statesmen, that is necessary for the public safety to have a good body of veteran soldiers ever in readiness. Yeah, I mean, true, we have certain benefits today that very much prove that, yeah, having veteran soldiers is a good thing, or at least well-trained professional warriors, because that's what we actually do have for the United States. It's a volunteer force, but they are trained and maintained as well. So, like, one thing that I know has been coming up recently with the whole flyovers, and some people like, oh, well, it's such a waste of money. It's like, actually, no, because they need to get time in. These pilots need to get time in on these aircraft in order to maintain flight ready. And this is actually true for any pilots. Once you get your pilot's license, even a civilian one, you need to fly so much a year or else you do lose it. So the flyovers are actually basically, hey, they got to be up in the air anyway. If they go over a sports game or something and go over a beach, something like that, there's still regulations as to how you do it. But doing that, where it's now letting people see the aircraft, that's just like a bonus. It's like the fuel was already going to be spent. It just, do you want it spent somewhere that no one can see or somewhere that people do see? And can be proud of it and just enjoy the sight. I mean, it's not a hard choice to make. They think raw men are not to be depended on, and they sometimes seek occasion for making war that they may train up their soldiers in the art of cutting throats. Or as Sallust observed, for keeping their hands in use that they may not grow dull by too long an intermission. But France has learned to its cost how dangerous it is to feed such beasts. The issue there is you don't necessarily need to be trained by war itself. Which maybe it's just no one had really... Well, no, people would have thought of that before, because I'm thinking about the gladiators in Rome, who, no, they did not fight to the death. But were they going to be capable of killing? Oh, yeah. But they didn't fight to the death. So clearly you can train somebody to not do that. But he even mentions the fate of the Romans, Carthaginians, and Syrians, and many other nations and cities, which were both overturned and quite ruined by those standing armies, should make others wiser. It's like, okay, what are you referring to here? I mean, yes, there were definitely times that the standing armies of Rome attacked Rome. I mean, it's like Caesar crossing the Rubicon. Pretty sure that's it. Was him bringing an army, his army, near Rome, which was something no general had done before, and was very much a power play, both militarily and politically. He also crossed the Rhine, which was military, but that's a completely different situation. I'm pretty sure it's the Rubicon that was the coming to Rome, and was a big deal. Was a very big deal, and it was also a gambit. I want to say, I don't remember all the history to that, but it was basically if he had misstepped, it would have been effectively suicide, because if he hadn't gotten the people on his side with doing that, the Senate would have had him executed, because that was a crime. But enough people on his side, they couldn't punish him. So it actually built up his reputation. Big gambit. But it's if he's instead referencing that eventually Rome started basically hiring mercenaries who were not Roman, that was then their standing army. It's like, okay, so you got a group of people that are not of your civilization or not of your culture, but they're responsible for protecting your civilization, protecting your culture. Why would they do that? Well, we're paying them. It's like, yeah, but if they just attack and take you over, they take over your treasury as well. Now they pay themselves. See, that's also a definite problem, but I'm not sure if that's what he's referencing here. And then does also have this: every day's experience shows that the mechanics in the town or the clowns in the country are not afraid of fighting it with those idle gentlemen. So he's basically saying that even you don't need the veterans to fight. You can service with green troops. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't mean they're going to be as good. I mean, I've been reading some books on the history of the Crusades, and it's very interesting because there are multiple stories where, especially with the Knights Templar and Hospitallers, where, because they were monks that were dedicated both to their faith but also to military skill, that, yeah, you would see, like, some of the battles it describes, you would have, like, a few hundred of them going up against thousands of Ottomans or Turks, Egyptians, various groups, thousands. And at the end of the day, the knights won, lost maybe a few dozen versus thousands. Like, they would still kill like 1,000 or 2,000 out of like a force of 6,000 or something. It's nuts. The disparity there. It's like one was better skilled than the other. That does matter. It does count. Also, they may have had better. Well, I don't know. At the later time periods, they would have been more on parity for their like armor and such. But I can also believe that the knights may have had better armor, at least for some parts of the Crusades. But still, it's like you're making arguments that even at this time you should know is not true. Okay, then we also get this because Morton does challenge the whole because he's saying that that they're forced to become thieves for this reason, that reason, but I do not think that this necessity of stealing arises only from hence that they don't have a war. There's another cause of it more peculiar to England. More is explaining this. What is that? Asked the cardinal, who's Morton. The increase of pasture. And this I actually find a little funny, because what it's basically describing is you've got these wealthy lords, you've got these abbots who are hearing that, there's better grass over there and soil there. All right, I'm going to claim that now. That's going to become mine, and I'm going to put my sheep there. Oh, there were people farming there? There were towns there? Remove them. And it is just kind of funny because, like, that's kind of what they're doing today with solar panels. It's like, oh, hey, there's farmland. Let's take that and put solar panels on that, casting out the people who have been working that land for a long period of time, destroying towns, also destroying the land because some of the chemicals that will leach from solar panels poison the ground, such that I can believe that there are ways to remediate it, but it's still that's going to take a lot of time, that's going to take a lot of money to do, but it's just funny when it's like, I mean, it's sheep in what he's describing here, but it's like, they're doing that shit now. Yet they stopped the course of agriculture, destroying houses and towns, reserving only the churches and enclosed grounds. Enclosed grounds that they may lodge their sheep in them, as if forests and parks had swallowed up too little of the land. Okay, let me. Yeah. Then I also have in here, in essence, it sounds like okay. As I mentioned before, that how he seems to just be like, oh, well, the thieves are the real victims here. And the efforts to correct, be made by the system rather than the thieves. It's like, it's like, oh, well, we need to do things to, like, ensure that, invest the time and energy to just make the situations better so they have no need to be thieves. It's like, they're still choosing to be thieves, dude. I mean, it's kind of like one thing that I do observe is that some people seem to have no idea concept that there are some people that just choose to be antisocial, choose to commit crimes, and are evil. It's like that there are people like that in the world. And to be clear, those are at separate degrees, what I was just listing off there. But it's still if they're choosing to be a thief, you can't just be like, oh, well, they're a victim, and then move. And then as though that's a solution. It's like, no. And I don't get me wrong. I also definitely believe, yes, we need to do more to make it employment easier to obtain, and such like that. It's like, yeah. But that doesn't excuse a thief being a thief. And it really gets funny when, oh yeah, it's actually on here as well, on this page. But let me just, yeah. Fortunately, it does eventually get to, somebody points out, well, it would be Morton, I think. On the contrary, they would look on the mitigation of the punishment as an invitation to commit more crimes. Yes, this has been proven out, sadly. And he just meanders away. He doesn't answer that, at least not directly. But also starts making certain claims that it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, this isn't actually true. And it was funny because I looked something up that is interesting. Because he says in here, okay, so just to quickly explain, he starts by arguing that there is a difference between murder, which, yeah, okay, you execute someone for that, and theft. And also mentions that apparently the Stoics had suggested the idea of all crimes are equal. In one sense, yes, but that's still not true. They are definitely not equal. Like, theft and murder are very different things. Which is also funny. He makes a claim later on where it's like, now you're arguing that they are the same thing. So it's like he really is just bouncing around and doesn't have a coherent argument here. But he does say this, though. God has commanded us not to kill, and shall we kill so easily for a little money? Basically saying that, hey, we're not supposed to kill, and yet you're doing so to people who are just thieves. It's like, that's actually not the commandment, okay? Like, this is something that it gets frustrating when people try to, like, make an argument like this, because it's false. It's not, the commandment is basically not accurately translated as thou shalt not kill. It's thou shalt not murder. Okay? Which is very different. Because killing by execution under the law is actually technically allowed. Like, I mean, and I'll get into that in a little bit as well. So yes, I'm criticizing what's written here, because like this, as I said, Raphael is frustrating me, because these are faulty arguments. 37 minutes. Trust me, this will go much longer. Sorry. But there's also the issue that you can't say that God has commanded us to not kill, because God also instructed people to kill in the Bible. That is mostly in the Old Testament, exclusively in the Old Testament, really. But it is there. God can't contradict himself. He can't say, you can't kill. By the way, those people there, go kill them. That's not how that works. It is you can't murder, because murder is not justifiable. But war can be. And God is just. Okay, so yes, go kill them. And you have like Samson, who's probably the most famous judge, but there was another judge of Israel who, I don't remember the name, but the circumstance was like there was a king who had conquered at least part of the Israelite people. And the judge went and killed him by, this dude was fat, was so obese, that he stabbed him with a knife and then left. The folds of his skin and fat was so thick, no one could see the knife or find it to remove it even. Okay? And he just ended up bleeding out and dying from that. It is presented in there as something of being in command. And also, you've got the Israelites destroying cities because of places that were denying God, as I recall, but also claiming the promised land that's not theirs to claim. Things like that, and just refusing to obey and such. So it's like, you have that there. It was actually very interesting when I read through the Bible, because I was expecting they tell you that, there's the Old Testament God. It's like, I'm reading, it's like, there's not a single time in there that there's a punishment that isn't just, in that here's what caused it, here's what the punishment is, and by the way, here's how it ends. Like, here's how there will be mercy, or when mercy is asked for, you'll receive. Like with the Babylonian exile, it's like, yeah, hey, I told you how to worship me and to only worship me. Did that hundreds of years ago. What are you doing now? You're worshiping idols. So yeah, Nebuchadnezzar, guess what? You get to rule the world. You can come over and take Israel. And what are we gonna do? The people of Israel would ask. It's like, hey, eventually you're gonna start praying back to me. You're gonna return to me. At that time, then I'll restore Israel to you. It's like, you always had that there. So this thou shalt not kill, that is not accurate. Because there are times where it's like, yeah, completely. That's what he's saying to do. But it was also interesting, and because this I looked up, because I said, it is based on justice, okay? That's very important. But I did a simple search of just, in the Bible, does God ever instruct someone to steal? Because it's just that there were times instructed people to kill. There's also, it was initially a man who God said, hey, your enemy is over here, go kill him. The man refused, and then it was, I think his wife or the wife of somebody else who went and killed him. And it was, the guy was asleep and took a tent stake and hammered it through his temple. Okay? It's like, this is God said, go do that. Okay, very much. You do have that in there. But this was during a time of war, as I recall, so it's like, was justified. And there would also be the argument being made that dude was the general or king, where it's like, you wipe him out, the war ends. So, but yeah, so I asked that question. Anytime God instructs somebody to steal, no, it says the Bible explicitly forbids stealing, as stated in the 8th commandment, you shall not steal. There are no instances where God instructs someone to steal. This is a search assist from DuckDuckGo, so yes, it is technically AI, but it is I can never remember a time when that's actually allowed. Or that there was any instruction to do so. I mean, there's also times when it's like, David technically commits adultery with, is it Bathsheba? I might have the name wrong. But it's like, technically he did. He was not instructed to do so, though. It's more so, yeah, he committed a sin, and there is punishments for that. But he was not instructed to do so. No instruction to steal, but there are instructions to kill. It does tell you that, yeah, there is more nuance than just thou shalt not kill. Anyway. And we also have here, if by Mosaic law, though it was rough and severe, as being a yoke laid on an obstinate and servile nation, men were only fined and not put to death for theft, we cannot imagine that in this new law of mercy, in which God treats us with the tenderness of a father, he has given us a greater license to cruelty than he did to the Jews. So basically saying, hey, if Mosaic law, which in Old Testament stuff, that's so horrible, it is not this severe, then how can you be? Which that's a fair argument, but there's also the issue that, as I pointed out, like when I read it, I was expecting all that fire and brimstone, but it's like, no, every single time, every judgment there, when I was reading it, it was just. There was a reason for it, and it was always tempered with mercy. There was always something and this is how it will end. Okay? Or if nothing else, it was always I told you not to do this, and now you're doing it. I mean, it's like one of the ones I also remember. How many sons did Aaron have? I feel like it was 4. Because God tells them, hey, this is how you worship me. Like, if you want to burn incense for me, it's like, okay, this is how you do it. This is the incense. But 2 of them were like, hey, when we were in Egypt, we learned some neat things. Like, hey, we can make a fire that's in different colors. Let's do that to honor God. And God's like, I just told you, you're struck dead because I just told you not to do that. It's like, always, there's justice there. And this is Aaron's sons, okay? Brother of Moses. The line of Aaron is the line of the priests, okay? And it's like, these 2 would have potentially been priests themselves, and their children been priests. And he struck them dead because they disobeyed. Therefore, it was just. But it's like, it's just that whole, see, a lot more continuity there than this is suggesting. But it's also, has he given us a greater license to cruelty than he did to the Jews? Well, there's also an issue there as well with, and I want to make sure. And my God, okay. I just want to make sure. Yeah, okay. Because I knew I'd written out 3 points. 2 of them were basically the same, that it's like, no, it was actually thou shalt not murder, not thou shalt not kill, more generically. And then just the reinforcement that God has directed people to kill in the Bible, never to steal, which does show that nuance, so it reinforces my point. But also I point out that in Romans, because I remember it, I just need to look it up where it was, Romans chapter 13, verse 1, it talks about how all authority on earth comes from God, because he's at least allowing that, if not directly saying yes. Which means then that when the state decides that their law is, this is your punishment, that actually is the authority for them to do so. Now, it's still a fair argument that why are we more severe than that, but you can't argue that, well, you can't do that because that is more severe. It's like, Romans 13:1, the state does have that authority. So, yeah, it's... I understand the argument you're making, but it's faulty grounds. Okay? And then we get this, which is the whole, as I said, he's now himself saying that, oh, well, it's all the same. For if a robber sees that his danger is the same if he is convicted of theft as if he were guilty of murder, this will naturally incite him to kill the person whom otherwise he would only have robbed. But it's like, I mean, it's... they would look on the mitigation of the punishment as an invitation to commit more crimes. And he's basically saying that, well, if we treat it the same, then they'll just commit the worst crime. It's like, no. I mean, so your whole argument is also that we recognize theft and murder are different things. And one is far more grave than the other, and so is more deserving of execution than theft. But now he goes to, well, but if it's all the same, then they'll just start killing people. It's like, so you're saying that these same people, that these thieves, might as well just be murderers. So then why would we not treat them the same? It's really just faulty logic. And if he's trying to be like, oh, but, it's just showing that, we shouldn't do that, because that we shouldn't treat it as the same, because then encourages them to do this. It's like, but you're then saying that they are going to be like, well, I might as well just kill them, that they are that black-hearted. And if they're that black-hearted, then it makes sense to just execute them, doesn't it? I mean, it just... Because now they are guilty of murder, so you don't have a problem with that. It's... Like I was saying earlier, have that one group A of thieves, the ones who are injured and incapable of gainful employment. What about the other group? He's grouping all these together as basically they would be black-hearted enough to just be murderers. Okay, but your actual argument only makes sense if that's not the group we're talking about. It's the other group that would only rob. They would not murder. Because they're the ones that deserve not being executed. The ones that would... So then your argument is not as good. Like I said, Raphael, he's really frustrating me. Okay, he then describes... He describes different solutions he's encountered, other governments, how they deal with theft. And it's... Yeah. But I'll get to it. It is also with contradictions. Those that are found guilty of theft among them are bound to make restitution to the owner, and not, as it is in other places, to the prince, state, for they reckon that the prince has no more right to the stolen goods than the thief. Yeah, no argument from me there. And I know there's a lot of people that would agree with that. But if that which was stolen is no more in being, then the goods of the thieves are estimated and restitution being made out of them. The remainder is given to their wives and children, and they themselves are condemned to serve in the public works, but are neither imprisoned nor chained, unless there happens to be some extraordinary circumstance in their crimes. Basically then describes that, they basically just have a curfew. It's like... So you're saying that they treat the criminals as trustworthy to just do this work? Because then there's also the issue of, well, wait a minute. You're saying that there's this work to be done. Why aren't they just employed then, doing that work already? Oh, well, they have to be forced to do it. It's like, okay, why is the government not just forcing them to do that before the theft is ever committed? Just, taking up the vagabonds and being like, hey, there's work to do, go do it. Well, we don't want... we did not give you an option. You're going to do that instead of being a beggar or a thief. It's like... doesn't really follow. But it's still a... I can kind of understand that. In some places, they are set to no public work, but every private man that has occasion to hire workmen goes to the marketplaces and hires them of the public a little lower than he would do a freeman. This may start to sound familiar. It sounds like there's a specific term for it that's used a little later. Their friends are allowed to give them either meat, drink, or clothes, so they are of their proper color, meaning proper health and such. But it is death both to the giver and taker if they give them money, nor is it less penal, meaning no less punished for any freeman to take money from them upon any account whatsoever. And it's also death for any of these slaves, so they are called to handle arms. He's straight... I mean, granted, this would have been a time that, yes, slavery was still practiced by basically every developed nation. I'm just trying to remember when the anti-slavery stuff... That really would have been more so early 19th century, late 18th century, I think. And this is 16th century, so... just that context is important, but it still is a... At least he freely acknowledges that, oh yeah, we just make them slaves. It's like, that's better? Where is it? Okay, yeah. They all wear a peculiar habit, which technically does lead to, well, I guess the habit would be put on top, of one certain color, and their hair is cropped to a little above their ears, and a piece of one of their ears is cut off. This is important. So it's basically talking about how you would identify these people in a crowd. So a specific haircut and specific habit. So let's just say clothing. So it's basically to say that if somebody goes into prison, they get shorn, and they have to wear the like orange, pink jumpsuits or the stripes, so that they are readily recognized. But the piece of the ear is cut off. This is important because it leads to certain issues. The very attempt of escape is no less punished than escape itself. It is death for any other slave to be accessory to it, and if freeman engages in it, he is condemned to slavery. Those that discover it are rewarded, if freemen in money, and if slaves with liberty, together with a pardon for being accessory to it. But also mentions that if they were to ever somehow successfully escape, that their clothes would give them away, but if they go around naked, then even their cropped ears would betray them. And it also describes a little later that that when they are every year they're basically brought up for a parole. That's some sort of thing to describe it, where it's okay, you know what? You seem to have mended your ways. We'll release you. You're free. They still have that cropped ear. So you're kind of stuck here now. So I'm just... Yeah, that didn't do what I was supposed to do. That's a problem. Because, they're always going to be recognized as these criminal slaves. Because of the ears. So it's and if they escape, that's death. So they're now out and able to be seen as, oh, that's an escaped thief. Get him! Always. You see the problem here? So even if they are free for any reason, they have been freed for any reason, they are forever marked as that. So they're forever in danger of somebody accusing them of being escaped, which might lead to them being summarily killed, either by, hey, escaped thief, get him, or in another town that's well, we know you're an escaped thief because, hey, you're not from here. Hey, we don't know you, and we can tell you were you are a convicted thief, and you're not supposed to be here, so I guess we need to kill you. I mean, what are you supposed to do? Be like, no, just send somebody over there. It'll take, days for you to reach this other town, ask them. It's like, that's not going to help. That's not going to work for all this. So yeah, it is impractical. And somebody even says, because, he's explaining this, and it's like, this could never work in England. It would be the downfall of the system. And, this then leads to the whole Morton basically saying, I'm pretty sure it's Morton. I was putting in my notes as Morton. I'm going to keep to that. Him then suggesting that, well, perhaps we could convince one of the princes to give a reprieve to a convicted thief. So instead of being executed, we try it on them. And then he's got the line of, when the cardinal had done, they all commended the motion, though they had despised it when it came from me. But as I said earlier, it was like, no, you were describing just the whole system as though it were superior in morality and such. You were just describing it as though, oh yeah, this is just better. And that you should just use it. It's like, and they're like, we can't implement that here. And so he came up with a middle ground. He came up with a solution to try it. That's what he suggested. That's what they're commending. They're not, the system itself, they don't necessarily trust, but it's, hey, that is the way we can try it. They're displeased with you because what you're suggesting isn't helping. It's like, you're not suggesting a solution. So, yeah, he's, this is going to be fun to go through because, man, I genuinely do not remember reading this before and being so annoyed by this guy. But to be fair, it's been probably 10 years or more since I last read it, as I mentioned previously. And I have definitely, I've read a lot more since then. I've thought a lot more since then, so that I can recognize these flaws, these faults to Raphael's view. And it does make me wonder a little bit then about more. And how much of this is more providing his own concepts, and assigning them to Raphael as a way to do so safely. So that it's like, well, no, I'm not saying, I'm just presenting it in fiction here so that somebody else can then make a judgment on it. I wonder if it's that, or if he is trying, if Raphael is himself an example of satire, in that he is this other extreme taken to that extreme to just demonstrate, yes, there are these new ideas that these other people are just very like, no, we can never do that. So you can have somebody like the Cardinal there in the middle that's like, well, we can try it, but we need to do so in a controlled manner. But this side is unhappy, but Raphael is still annoyed and just is taking it the wrong way because he's an idiot. It's just, it could be that as well. It is just an interesting thing. And I do look forward to continuing to read it, but at the same time, it's I'm going to get more and more angry with this guy, aren't I? In a way, though, it is also speaking to what I was saying before about why I wanted to go through this, is because a lot of people, they associate that word with paradise. It's not. And this dude is an idiot, and he thinks that it's great. But he's an idiot. Like I said, with the whole, you've mutilated the person's ear. They can never be free now because they can never be free of that. And by the way, I do want to mention another story that I've read. I likely will not do an assigned reading for it, partly because it's quite long. Also, I read it not too long ago, probably within the past 3 or 4 years, which is Ben-Hur. Okay, because yes, it is based on a book. And it's very interesting to have read that and then watched the 20s, the silent Ben-Hur from the 20s, and also the 59, with Charlton Heston, which, by the way, is my favorite movie. I love that movie. Both neither completely represent the book, but both are still accurate in those portions they represent. Kind of. There are some things that are different, but it's like, you can still appreciate it, right? As, yes, that is still the story, but one aspect to it. In the movie, there's, I'm blanking on his name now. I'm just remembering Jaffe. I can't remember his first name. Anyway, he is Simonides, I'm pretty sure that's the name, who is the steward of the House of Hur, and he is a slave. He is bound to the house of Her, but he is the steward, so he's actually running everything, and he is very, very good at it. And you get the line in the 59 from Ben-Hur that when he inherited Simonides from his father, he did not inherit a slave, he inherited a friend. In the book, he, yes, was a slave at one point, but he was going to be released. That basically there were different kinds of slaves in the Jewish world, and his term of slavery, because ancient slavery is very different from what you typically think of for modern slavery, including that it would be kind of closer to indentured servitude in some ways, not in all ways. So he would have been released. However, he fell in love with another slave there, a woman, and wanted to marry her, but she would not allow it, because she was a different class of slave. She was one who actually had her ear pierced, so ear mutilation, that marked her not just as a slave, but forever. She can never have her freedom, okay? I don't remember the exact context for why, but it could never happen. And she would never allow somebody who could be free to be bound to her. Now, she did love him as well, but it's like, I can't do that to you kind of thing. He had to then convince Ben-Hur's father, well, Ben-Hur is the surname, but still, to make him that kind of slave and have his ear pierced in the same way, so then he could marry this woman. And he does. And they end up having the daughter Esther, who, the character in the 20s version is technically a little bit more accurate than in the 50s version. In the 50s version, they actually are combining Esther with another character, and also aging her some. But it's still very well done in 59. I don't know. I can't remember if the daughter, if Esther was technically also considered a slave or not, or if she may have been a different class of slave. Either way, though, I could definitely see it being that Judah Ben-Hur, that would be the main character for the bulk of the story, and his father, I could definitely see being like, yeah, no, we understand why you did this. We can't really free her. That we're not allowed to do that to the mother, but no, Esther will be a slave in that your child is going to stay with you. Your child indefinitely, well, it's going to stay with you indefinitely because your parent and child, we're not separating you. And so she will be part of the house of Her as that, but no, we're not going to pierce the ear. Why do we do that? We don't need to do that. Because I don't recall there ever being a mention of her having the pierced ear. Because it would be a problem later on, because Simonides in the book had traveled to Antioch and basically was this mystery merchant who was very successful because he took the money from the house of Her, at least what had survived. Because he a lot of it was stolen. This is not in, I think, either movie. But he had arranged various caravans, ships, and contracts. He just assumed those himself as this mysterious merchant. But he would have, he was very careful to keep himself hidden because he would be, people could potentially recognize him for who he is and also recognize he's a slave. And the specific kind of slave that, whoa, major problem, he can't be allowed to do that. I don't recall there being any mention of Esther also needing to hide herself in that way. So it is possible that she was not that type of slave, but technically was still a slave. But it, as I said, that may have just been more of a formality kind of thing, just in title only kind of thing, just so they stay together, the family stays together. But then later, as is depicted in both movies and is in the book, she and Judah get married, and what's not in either movie, but is in the book, they end up having at least 2 kids. It's 2 or 3. The book is fascinating for how some of the differences are. Because like in the 20s version, I know I'm just going off, but in the 20s version, you've got far more the military part of the story. Because in that, and in the book, he wanted to actually lead a rebellion that he, form an army and hand it over to Jesus to then kill all the Romans. He wanted to do that. In the 50s version, you don't see it to that degree. There are lines that show that he wants to do that, but we don't see it coming to fruition in any way. In the book, oh no, he is actually getting the army going, and in in the 20s movie, you do see some of this as well. So, yeah, it's been too recent for me, I think, to do an assigned reading on that. And I got plenty of stuff I would rather read before that. But I do recommend it. I do recommend the book, Ben-Hur, A Tale of Christ, which is also Project Gutenberg. I don't know if that's also on standard ebooks, but I know it's on Project Gutenberg because I would have read it from there, I believe. Yes, because I was aware of it before. I read it before I was even aware standard ebooks exist. So yeah, you can find that and read that. Good story. And led to, what, 3 different movies? The 20s, the 50s, and there's one in the 2000s, something that I've never watched, because I love the 50s version. I love the 1959 Ben-Hur. And I remember seeing the trailers for the new one, and it's like, they're just making an action film. And it's like, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of story, plenty of action in the story. But it's an epic that spans a lot. We can do better. Okay? I mean, it's like, don't just make an action movie, make it, tell the story. Let me put it another way. For how, just as far as what I would like to see, if somebody were to take that story and make it into like a mini-series kind of thing, because legitimately you could probably spend 8-10 hours doing that. So that could be like when these shorter series that you see places do, you could probably do that going through it, and it would be fascinating because it does so much. It'd be cool. It'd be really cool. And I think if you were to do it correctly, as in staying true to what was written, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. He was a Civil War general. Wrote it after the Civil War. And it was, for a time, the best-selling novel. Okay, I mean, it's like, very significant that. I do think that you could, you could see that be very successful, but you need to keep it true to the story. Don't just lean into the action. There's plenty of it already in there, but the drama elements to it, very important as well. You need to keep those too. All right. Enough of my blathering. I still have half this chapter to go. Fun stuff. See you next time.